when I flunked out of radio school, I went to sent me to Philadelphia Navy Yard, and from there I was put in a pool of sailors to be used as however they determined, you know, put me aboard this ship or that ship or whatever. Well, they came along and asked for volunteers for special duty, and I said, well, I'll volunteer. I was bored again, as usual. And they said, this is amphibious forces. And I said, oh, good, that'll be fun. I thought, well, again, I was wrong. I thought swimming. Well, you know, amphibious means land and water, but it don't mean swimming. So they took us to a place called Lido Beach, New York, on Long Island. And it was not too far from Manhattan, but far enough that you had to take a train. It was outside of Jamaica. Jamaica was the train. It took a Jamaica train to get there and all that. Anyhow, they took us over there and took us into this hotel that had been a resort hotel, but they had closed it up for that during the war, and made it into a Navy place. And they took us in there, and they took us in the ballroom, and they said they had spots painted on the ballroom floor with numbers on the spots. And they said, put your sea bag on a spot and stand there with your ditty bag. And sea bag had most of your stuff in it, and the ditty bag had your toiletries and stuff like that in it. Well, then they said, stand there. They said, and then they announced for all of us to take off all our clothes and roll them and put them in the sea bag. All your clothes, they said. So we couldn't figure out what the hell was going on, but they made us all get nude there. And here we are, a whole bunch of guys standing there naked, again, just like going through boot camp. And they marched us down the hallway and handed us some clothing. And when I looked at them, it was kind of dark in the hallway, but once you got past that and got where you could see, they were Army uniforms, fatigues. We thought, what the heck's going on here? So the next window that we passed, there was passing out arms, and they gave me a Browning automatic rifle, a BAR. I don't know whether any of you know what that is or not, but it is a pain in the butt because it's heavy, and it's got a tripod that you hook to the front end of it. When you're laying down to shoot it, you use the tripod, and you're supposed to know how to break it down and clean it and all that stuff, but they didn't show us how to do that. The Navy at that time wasn't too swift about teaching you what you needed to know, but nevertheless, they gave me that equipment. And we were there for about a week, and the only thing they did train us on was we went out to the shore. It was a beach, and shot whatever arms we had, if it was a pistol or if it was a rifle or if it was a BAR or whatever it was, we shot it into the ocean. And we did that 3 times, and then they came along we were only there about 3 or 4 days, and they told us to pack up. Meantime, they'd taken our sea bags away from us. We didn't know where they were. All we had was our ditty bag and the clothes they'd given us. So we were awakened in the middle of the night, and it was still dark out, and put on a truck and taken downtown and to a pier. And they said, board that ship and go down below and find yourself a bunk and get on it and stay there until you're told to do something else. So that we did, and I fell asleep. And when I awoke, a guy was shaking me, telling me, wake up, it's time to eat. And I said, well, where's the mess hall? Where do we eat? And he told me, and I followed him, and we went and got something to eat. After we ate, he said, let's go. We had gone from where we were sleeping up one deck, and that's where the mess hall was. And then we went on up to top deck, outside, and we were at sea. There was no land to be seen in any direction. First time I'd ever been that far away from land. But there were about 400 ships all around us. We were in a convoy, and we were heading we didn't know where. For 11 days we zigged and zagged and sat out on deck, and I watched Army guys play poker, and I didn't have any money until one guy had made a gopher out of me. I'd get him coffee and stuff like that, and he'd give me a dollar or two, sometimes a $5, depending on whether he won or not. And by the time I got to where we were going, I had a little pocket full of money. And turned out we were in the invasion of Casablanca. We were not in the first wave. We were in the second wave, where we did not have too much firing either direction. We ran into a little bit, but not hardly nothing. It was almost all over by the time we got there. We were, like I say, second wave. And when we did get situated, and they got us to where we were going, our unit, the amphibious, we traveled with the Army. We were with Patton's armored organization, and but then they detached us from them, and we were again, we were a naval unit. And when they took us to where the naval base there, right on the docks, miraculously there was my sea bag, and I got rid of the Army clothes and got back to Navy dungarees and things like that. And then they assigned me, my first assignment was tending to divers. In those days, divers wore the big suits, the ones you see with the big helmet, and you can't see the diver's face. They didn't use scuba in those days, and they had airlines that came from the helmet, and you would sit there with them in your hand on the dock, so you could feel the air pulse going through them. And if you ever got to a point where there was nothing going through them, and you would know that, because you could pick them up and feel what they felt like when they weren't being used, and that's how they would feel. If they did that, you immediately would jerk on the lines and get him to come up, because that meant he was not getting any air. Anyway, you were kind of watching over him, and you kept the compressor running to pump the air for him. He had a big compressor there. And what we were doing, we were sending divers down to patch up holes so we could pump air into ships and bring them up that the Germans had scuttled at the docks, or the French had scuttled, somebody had scuttled them. They were ships that, like small steamers that went from up and down the coast of Africa. Or sometimes they went other places. But nevertheless, that was my first job over there, and I did that for quite a while. And then my buddy and I, Bill Cunningham, I met him in Great Lakes when I first got in. But anyway, he and I were tight, close buddies. We were both, I don't know what his job was at the time, but we were both bored. And we decided that we were going to go see some of there was no shooting or anything going on around us. There was no war, really. It was just, boring. So we took off. Shouldn't have, but we did. And then before that happened, though, before we took off, I was, like I say, I was bored, and they came around asking for volunteers again. Well, the first time that happened, I should have known better, because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So this time I should have said no. I just shouldn't have stepped forward, but I did. And I stepped forward and said, I'll volunteer, you know, whatever it is. A special duty, they called it. So they put us all, they didn't take my uniform or dungarees or anything away from me that time. But they did tell me to take my ditty bag and take a change of clothes and stuff like that with me. So I did, and they put me on an Army vehicle with a bunch of other guys, Army and Navy. And they put the curtain down the back so we couldn't see where we were going or anything. And when we got stopped and they pulled the curtain up and told us to get out, and we were in a luxury complex where there was a big hotel and a bunch of villas around surrounding it. And they marched us over to this sergeant, and he said, you go there, you go there, you go there, you know, and I, when he got to me, you go there, and he sent me in to the hotel, and there was another sergeant in there who said, you go here, and he took me up to the 7th floor, and right there, standing in front of that door, that's Admiral King, who was Chief of Naval Operations at the time, Admiral King, and you're going to be his orderly. And he didn't, you know, if you'd say, well, what's he doing here? And they wouldn't tell you nothing. Anyhow, you're supposed to stand there, and if he come to the door and said, orderly, go get me this, or go get me that, or do this, or do that, whatever, that's what you did. So there I was in for another boring time. So about that time, this sergeant come back, and there was about 4 of us standing at doors in this hallway. He said, any of you guys ever tend bar? And I raised my hand and said, I did. And he said, where'd you tend bar? I said, well, my dad had a bar, and I tended bar for him. So he believed me. So he said, come on with me. And he had another person with him, whether it was Army or Navy, I don't know, but he put him in that door for Admiral King. And he took me over to one of the villas that was surrounding there, and took me in the front door and told some guy that was in there, here's your man, and left. And this guy said, come on with me, and took me into this big sitting room. It was about as big as, well, I don't know, it was like a banquet room, only it was a regular front room, so it was. It had a couch and chairs, and right in the corner it had a little bar. And the bar was about as big as the piano as far as length was concerned. But you could get behind it, and it had glasses and everything there. So I got behind there, and immediately I started searching around to see what was there, and I found an old Mr. Boston book which told you how to mix drinks. And I thought, boy, I got it made now. About that time, a guy walked in civilian clothes, and we're in North Africa, and it's wartime, and this guy was an American speaking American English. He said, can you mix a martini? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, my name's Harry Hopkins. And I thought to myself, I heard that name, but I couldn't figure who it was. Who it turned out to be was really strange. But I mixed him his drink, and he laughed. He drank a little bit of it, and he said, that tastes pretty good. You did pretty good on the mixing. But he said, why did you give it to me in a water glass? And I said, what? He said, let me show you something. He come behind the bar and showed me the glasses and showed me the ones to use for different drinks and everything else. And he was a real savior to me. But about that time he left, and nobody was there, and I was standing there waiting for something to do, and all of a sudden the door opened, and there was a bedroom down there, and the door opened, and here come a black gentleman carrying a man and set him down on the couch. And I looked, and I almost, at 18 years old, almost had a heart attack. I said, are you President Roosevelt? And he said, I was when I got up this morning. And that was the beginning of my time of bartending for Franklin Delano Roosevelt for the Casablanca Conference, and also getting to meet Winston Churchill and the guy who at that time was king of Morocco, and his son who succeeded him, and they're both passed on now, and even the grandson who I didn't get to meet, who probably wasn't even born yet, he's passed on, and